branch. The young beech did not as yet reach the high branch canopy, so the boy couldn't get over to another tree, and he didn't dare to come down again. He was so cold and numb that he almost lost his hold around the branch, and he was dreadfully sleepy, but he didn't dare fall asleep for fear of tumbling down. My, but it was dismal to sit in that way the whole night through, out in the forest! He never before understood the real meaning of night. It was just as if the whole world had become petrified, and never could come to life again. Then it commenced to dawn. The boy was glad that everything began to look like itself once more, although the chill was even sharper than it had been during the night. Finally, when the sun got up, it wasn't yellow, but red. The boy thought it looked as though it were angry, and he wondered what it was angry about. Perhaps it was because the night had made it so cold and gloomy on earth, while the sun was away. The sunbeams came down in great clusters to see what the night had been up to. It could be seen how everything blushed, as if they all had guilty consciences. The clouds in the skies, the satiny beech limbs, the little intertwined branches of the forest canopy, the hoar frost that covered the foliage on the ground, everything grew flushed and red. More and more sunbeams came bursting through space, and soon the night terrors were driven away, and such a marvellous lot of living things came forward. The black woodpecker with the red neck began to hammer with its bill on the branch. The squirrel glided from his nest with a nut and sat down on a branch and began to shell it. The starling came flying with a worm, and the bullfinch sang in the tree top. Then the boy understood that the sun had said to all these tiny creatures: "Wake up now, and come out of your nests! I'm here! Now you need be afraid of nothing." The wild goose call was heard from the lake as they were preparing for flight, and soon all 14 geese came flying through the forest. The boy tried to call to them, but they flew so high that his voice couldn't reach them. They probably believed the fox had eaten him up, and they didn't trouble themselves to look for him. The boy came near crying with regret, but the sun stood up there, orange coloured and happy, and put courage into the whole world. "It isn't worth while, Nils Holgersson, for you to be troubled about anything as long as I'm here," said the sun. Goose Play, Monday, March 21st. Everything remained unchanged in the forest about as long as it takes a goose to eat her breakfast. But just as the morning was verging on forenoon, a goose came flying all by herself under the thick tree canopy. She groped her way hesitatingly between the stems and branches, and flew very slowly. As soon as Smirre Fox saw her, he left his place under the beech tree and sneaked up toward her. The wild goose didn't avoid the fox, but flew very close to him. Smirre made a high jump for her, but he missed her, and the goose went on her way down to the lake. It was not long before another goose came flying. She took the same route as the first one, and flew still lower and slower. She, too, flew close to Smirre Fox, and he made such a high spring for her that his ears brushed her feet. But she, too, got away from him unhurt, and went her way toward the lake, silent as a shadow. A little while passed, and then there came another wild goose. She flew still slower and lower, and it seemed even more difficult for her to find her way between the beech branches. Smirre made a powerful spring. He was within a hair's breadth of catching her, but that goose also managed to save herself. Just after she had disappeared came a fourth. She flew so slowly and so badly that Smirre Fox thought he could catch her without much effort. But he was afraid of failure now, and concluded to let her fly past, unmolested. She took the same direction as the other had taken, and just as she was come right above Smirre, she sank down so far that he was tempted to jump for her. He jumped so high that he touched her with his tail, but she flung herself quickly to one side and saved her life. Before Smirre got through panting, three more geese came flying in a row. They flew just like the rest, and Smirre made high springs for them all, but he did not succeed in catching any one of them. After that came five geese, but these flew better than the others, and although it seemed as if they wanted to lure Smirre to jump, he withstood the temptation. After quite a long time came one single goose. It was the 13th. This one was so old that she was gray all over, without a dark speck anywhere on her body. She didn't appear to use one wing very well, but flew so wretchedly and crookedly that she almost touched the ground. Smirre not only made a high leap for her, but he pursued her, running and jumping all the way down to the lake. But not even this time did he get anything for his trouble. When the 14th goose came along, it looked very pretty because it was white, and as its great wings swayed, it glistened like a light in the dark forest. When Smirre Fox saw this one, he mustered all his resources and jumped half way up to the tree canopy, but the white one flew by unhurt like the rest. Now it was quiet for a moment under the beeches. It looked as if the whole wild goose flock had travelled past. Suddenly Smirre remembered his prisoner and raised his eyes toward the young beech tree, and, just as he might have expected, the boy had disappeared. But Smirre didn't have much time to think about him, for now the first goose came back again from the lake and flew slowly under the canopy. In spite of all his ill luck, Smirre was glad that she came back, and darted after her with a high leap. But he had been in too much of a hurry, and hadn't taken the time to calculate the distance, and he landed at one side of the goose. Then there came still another goose, then a third, a fourth, a fifth, and so on until the angle closed in with the old icy gray one and the big white one. They all flew low and slow. Just as they swayed in the vicinity of Smirre Fox, they sank down, kind of inviting like, for him to take them. Smirre ran after them and made leaps a couple of fathoms high, but he couldn't manage to get hold of a single one of them. It was the most awful day that Smirre Fox had ever experienced. The wild geese kept on travelling over his head. They came and went, came and went. Great, splendid geese who had eaten themselves fat on the German heaths and grain fields, swayed all day through the woods, and so close to him that he touched them many times. Yet he was not permitted to appease his hunger with a single one of them. The winter was hardly gone yet, and Smirre recalled nights and days when he had been forced to tramp around in idleness, with not so much as a hare to hunt, when the rats hid themselves under the frozen earth, and when the chickens were all shut up. But all the winter's hunger had not been as hard to endure as this day's miscalculations. Smirre was no young fox. He had had the dogs after him many a time, and had heard the bullets whizz around his ears. He had lain in hiding down in the lair, while the dachshunds crept into the crevices and all but found him. But all the anguish that Smirre Fox had been forced to suffer under this hot chase was not to be compared with what he suffered every time that he missed one of the wild geese. In the morning, when the play began, Smirre Fox had looked so stunning that the geese were amazed when they saw him. Smirre loved display. His coat was brilliant red, his breast white, his nose black, and his tail was as bushy as a plume. But when the evening of this day was come, Smirre's coat hung in loose folds. He was bathed in sweat. His eyes were without lustre. His tongue hung far out from his gaping jaws, and froth oozed from his mouth. In the afternoon Smirre was so exhausted that he grew delirious. He saw